By 5:30 I was dressed and ready for the day. The phone rang and I sighed. I knew who it was. "Hello?" "Good morning," my mother said. "Mom, why do you call so early in the morning? I knew you'd be up." "But I could have been sleeping." "Were you sleeping?" "No." "See? I knew you'd be up." It was no use. I could always count on at least 3 or 4 early morning calls a week. For years I had tried to break her from calling so early with no success. "Just wanted to let you know that I'm going Christmas shopping with Miriam today. What do you and Mark want for Christmas? Do you need anything for the house?" "We don't need anything, Mom." "You may not need anything, but you might want something. Do you want anything fun?" Every year she tried so hard. "I can't think of anything." She was quiet for a moment before sounding upbeat again. "Okay. Well, if you think of anything, you just let me know. I'll be out shopping on other days, too, and I can pick up whatever. You just let me—" I cut her off and told her I'd call after I got home from work, and hung up. When my father left, he told my mom he was going to the store to buy a newspaper, and never came home. The police showed up on our doorstep before my mother had a chance to report him missing. He had taken thousands of dollars from the company he worked for, and they had come to collect and throw him in jail. We were evicted from our apartment, our belongings were seized, and the Dodge Dart was repossessed. We stayed in a motel for 3 nights, but then what little money my mother had ran out. The morning we left the motel, my mother packed our clothes in a paper bag and stuck it under her arm. She took hold of Richard's hand and instructed me to hold on to his other hand as we made our way down the street. After walking several blocks, Richard declared he was too tired to go any farther, and my mother lifted him onto her hip. "Where are we going?" Richard asked, over and over again. "We're going to see some people," my mother said. When we got to the sidewalk leading up to the front door of the church, my mother set Richard down and straightened his clothes. "We going to church, Mommy?" Richard asked. "It's not Sunday." My mother opened the door and looked around. "What you looking for, Mommy?" Richard asked. I rolled my eyes and wished he would be quiet for once. A woman in a pale pink dress peeked her head around the corner. "Hi," she said. "I thought I heard voices. Can I help you?" I looked up at my mother, but she couldn't speak. Nothing was coming out. I noticed her eyes were filling with tears, and the woman in pink noticed too. She leaned down to Richard and me. "We've got a plate full of peanut butter cookies back in the kitchen that I made for luncheon today. Would you like some with a great big glass of milk?" We nodded, and she took our hands. Another woman with glasses, sitting behind a desk, looked up and smiled at us. "Mrs. Burke," the woman in pink said, "these children are hungry for cookies. Maybe you and Pastor Burke might like to visit with their mother." Mrs. Burke saw the tears in my mother's eyes and got up from her desk. "Just take your time," Mrs. Burke said to the woman in pink. I'm not sure how many cookies we ate, but when Mom walked into the kitchen, the plate was nearly empty. "Thank you," my mother said, looking at the woman in pink. "Thank you very much." We walked outside, and a woman driving a station wagon was in the driveway waving at us. "I'm Geraldine Culberson," she said, looking at my mother. "Just hop on in." Mom ushered us inside the car, and Geraldine drove us to her home. "We've got a bed and a couch down here," she said, leading us into the basement. "And the bathroom is right at the top of the stairs." She turned to leave. "I'll have lunch ready in about an hour, so you just get settled in and come on up whenever you're ready." My mother sat on the edge of the bed. She didn't say anything. She just pulled Richard and me close to her and cried. We lived in Geraldine and George's basement for 6 months until someone else in the church had a small apartment we could rent. Mom found a part-time job answering phones and doing the books for a small dress shop while Geraldine watched Richard. When I got out of school, I walked to the Culbersons' house, and when Mom was finished working, we all walked home to our apartment together. My mother lost her smile after my father left. I was too young to fully realize what was wrong, but knew it had to have something to do with the mess my father had left us in. Creditors were threatening her on every side, but she had nothing left for them to take. It was a few weeks before Christmas when my mother broke down at the kitchen table. She held on to several letters and wept. I ran down the street for Mrs. Culberson. She read through a letter and patted my mother's shoulder. "Nobody's going to take your kids away from you, Charlotte," she said. "Don't you worry about that." Several days later, Pastor and Mrs. Burke knocked on the apartment door. My mother invited them in and put on a pot of coffee to brew. When she finished her coffee, Mrs. Burke opened her purse and pulled out an envelope. She pushed it across the table to my mother. Mom opened it and gasped. "I can't take this," she whispered. "You take it and pay off every single bill," Pastor Burke said. My mother moved the envelope back across the table, but Mrs. Burke stopped her. "I can't go back to all these people and tell them that what God laid on their heart was wrong. God wanted them to help, and that's what they've done." Mom sat clutching the fat envelope. "But I don't know who gave this," she whispered. "How can I ever thank them?" "They didn't do it for the thanks, Charlotte," Mrs. Burke said. "But God knows who they are. He'll thank them." Mom shook her head and used a towel sitting on the table to wipe her face. Mrs. Burke leaned toward Mom and squeezed her hand. "Sometimes we're not supposed to be in on every single part of God's plan. Sometimes we just need to take the blessing and run." The Burkes left, and I watched from the hallway as my mother cried, clutching the envelope. That was the end of the creditors, the letters, and the threats, and the return of my mother's smile. I poured what coffee there was left in my cup down the sink, cleaned and polished the coffee pot, and opened the garage door. I wanted to beat the traffic across town. I drove to the office, turned on the computer at my desk, and rummaged through my files, making sure everything was updated. I closed a drawer in my desk, and the sound made a toy fish on Roy Braden's desk move to the tune of "Grandma Got Run Over by a Reindeer." For the last few weeks, that fish had been driving me crazy. Roy had worked for family services longer than I had. His first wife died after 28 years of marriage, leaving Roy lonely and depressed. Thinking he was in love, Roy married Ella a year after his wife's funeral. It was a mistake. The marriage lasted less than 2 years. Now he'd been dating Barbara for 4 years, but was gun-shy about marriage. Roy was a father of 4, grandfather of 5 and counting, and a good friend. I noticed a donut sitting on his desk, and I rolled over in my chair and swiped it. His cholesterol was up, and he had no business eating a greasy donut. I heard his voice and pushed the last of the donut into my mouth. He walked to his desk and stopped. "Patty, did you see a donut on my desk?" "No, I don't see anything." "I could swear I put a donut right here." He started toward the lounge. "I'll just go get another one." "There's none back there," I said, typing. He threw up his hands. "All a man wants is a lousy donut. Is that too much to ask?" "From my view, it looks like the man has had too many donuts over the years." He stopped and looked at me. "I guess you went into social work so you could encourage and uplift." I laughed as my phone rang. It was Lynn McSwain, our supervisor. He was calling from his cell phone. I pressed the phone closer to my ear. "Okay," I said. "I'll take care of her." I hung up the phone. "Bridget Sloan was taken to county a few minutes ago," I said, pulling a file from my cabinet. "What for?" Roy asked. "Selling to an undercover cop." I shook my head, shoving files into my briefcase. "She left Mia in her crib at 7 o'clock last night and never went back home. The police are at the apartment now." Bridget Sloan was 18 years old and the mother of a beautiful 10-month-old daughter who was an albatross around her neck. If she had any idea who the father was, she would have fought him for child support so she could use the money for drugs. We had placed Mia in a foster home for 3 months when she was born so Bridget could finish a jail term for bad checks. I called that foster family again to see if they were available to take Mia this time. The message on the machine said they were out of town. I called Sandra and Guy Michaels, a new family I had worked with and liked. "Bring her any time," Sandra said. I hung up the phone and grabbed my purse. "You up for tagging along?" I asked Roy. He followed me to the elevator. We entered Bridget's apartment and found a police officer bouncing Mia up and down. She was screaming. It was cold inside the tiny 3-room apartment. "We're with DFS," I said to the officer. Reaching for Mia, I gave the officer my business card. "Doesn't the electricity work?" I asked. Nothing works, the officer